Hi, welcome to another episode of our blog. Today, your host is G.A.N. Mohim, and I'm the co-founder and head of research and development at Waterlootec Technologies. Today, we are here to explain the software design and architecture section of our course offering, and this is our first episode on this topic. The intended audience are students, junior developers who are about to enter their co-op terms and professional job market respectively. The objective of this blog is to explain the origin of software architecture and its application in real-world job. Yes, we understand that this is a subject in senior year at your university program. You might have some insight into it. But our objective is to highlight what the book may not teach you. We give you insight into how you can map what you're learning today into the future job roles. We'll also reveal what most of your colleagues at work may not reveal just because they're too busy or they know that you might know it. So consider this as our spoiler alert for the smartest guy you have seen at work who somehow magically always seem to know what's going on. So let's share this. If you look at my screen, and you'll see a picture of a floor plan or a design map. Surprisingly enough, software design and architecture has a root with traditional architecture as we know it. Allow me to go to the next slide. As you can see, there are a bunch of row townhouses, I believe, and they are set side by side and they have a somewhat similar pattern. In fact, if we go back to the history of software design and architecture, the inspiration of software architecture was taken from non-software root. What I mean by that is it was invented by someone named Christopher Alexander. He's a very renowned architect. In 1977, I believe he published an article on patterns, and this has nothing to do with software design. It was relating to design pattern for the streets. So what I mean by that is at that time, there was a need to streamline different type of street design patterns. So as you can see on my screen, by the way, I put the source at the bottom so that we know exactly where the source has been taken from. As you can see, the first example, first block in here, it shows gridiron. And then we have organic, and then we have loose grid in there. So what this means, as you can see, gridiron, most of the streets in the neighborhood or in the cities in North America, across US and Canada, you'll see that majority of them has this gridiron pattern. Let me open up a browser window and I'll show you what that means. So if you look at the Google Maps here, I live in Waterloo, so as you can see in the city in the map, I selected a random area. As you can see, there are a bunch of grids in here. Surprisingly enough, you see there's these grids almost have similar sizes and similar shapes. So this is what it means, going back to the screen example we have in here about the origin of architecture. So now what this has to do with software architecture and design. The software world has been taking the inspiration from these design patterns, and there were articles subsequently being published around design patterns. Some of you know there's a famous book called The Gang of Four, which have, I believe, a 20 plus design pattern in that book. And it talks about all type of design patterns. So everything in that book, that design pattern, the inspiration has been taken from the example of Christopher Alexander. Now, in the software world, that design pattern translates to a common standard to convey overall software architecture. And one tool that is used is called the Unified Modeling Language, or UML. UML 2.0 is widely used. So allow me to show you a simple example what that means. Let me pop up a screen. As you can see, I have a hand-drawn example. Yes, I have drawn this using hand. I had tools in my machine. I did not use it. There are a bunch of tools you can use to draw similar diagram if that helps you. There is a free program called Star UML. You can use that across Windows and Linux. It's free of charge. And if you want to pay some money, you can get something better. Microsoft has a program that has very niche tool around drawing UML diagrams. And if you're someone who's a Confluence user, in case if you don't know, you can get paid subscription for a plugin that allows you to draw UML diagram. Again, UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. The objective of this vlog is not to touch every single area of UML or going in depth about software design and architecture. Our objective is to keep it brief. So in this case, I'm going to use an example to show you a couple standards. One is called the component diagram, another one is called deployment diagram. They go hand in hand, so I thought I show this as an example. For those of you might have seen this in your class and know that, you might be learning ideas similar to this, but stick till the end. I'm going to give you some spoilers so you know exactly what you can or cannot expect at work. So let's dive into this example. In this example, as you can see, I had made 3 different blocks. So we're going to start from the 3rd block down, then we're going to jump to the first one. I'm going to show you the stories as a single element after we finish this. As you can see, underneath here, we have a diagram. This has nothing to do with UML standard, just so we know. This is just a human readable format. Imagine you started with your first job, you're walking through the hallway at your new company and you're seeing some fancy diagram or big block of diagram posted on the wall or in the cafeteria, and it all makes sense. It's nice and very straightforward. In this case, what we're trying to convey with this example is this. In a hypothetical company, in this case, in a hypothetical example, in this case, we have a cloud server which is hosting a bunch of services, which is owned by this company. And in our case, we have 2 different type of client. One client is actually the stakeholders of the business. Think of it this way. Think of it as a service provider. In service provider, there's twofold. One is that you have customers, and then another one is you have employees. Okay, so you're providing a bunch of tools, set of tools, so your customer can access. Think of some sort of service you're providing, something is being purchased from your website, or you are doing you're selling some sort of software, and which customer can access through the portal, a web portal or some sort of application. On the same fold, to manage the customers, you need different type of portals, which will be used by the employees of the same company. That has to deal with billing, customer complaint, customer satisfaction, and in fact, even to manage your employees and manage the different communications of the executives and mention it. Anything you mention that has to do with the company, imagine that that's been done through a separate portal. So this is a very straightforward example. You are doing something, your customer is doing something on different type of platform. Imagine a platform that can take account of different types of devices and form factors. In this case, there's a laptop, there is a mobile phone, and this, for lack of a better example, imagine this is a cell tower, or you can think of this as your Wi-Fi connectivity, so that customers are browsing and connecting to cloud server and getting some service. And same way, your employees are doing a similar thing, but in a different way, more customer centric. So now, imagine you're first day at work. You have seen this, and then as part of the training material, you are given a very simple diagram, right? Look at the diagram on top. Think of this a sample diagram, by the way. It's not something real. We just mocked it out to point the idea across, to get the idea across. So in this case, if you can see that Waterlootec Client Portal is a type of component, and Waterlootec Employee Portal is another type of component. Right, I say component because this structure, every element in here is actually abiding a UML standard. So none of these are random or spontaneous. Everything is understood across the industry. And if you speak to this with any software architecture or your senior designer, they would know what that means. So imagine you were handed out this article as part of your training program in the first few weeks. And the way one would read this is that we have different components in here, right? These are customer-centric, these are employee-centric, and these are kind of interfaces to connect to something in the back end. We are not showing the back end in here. We're saying that we have Waterlootec client services, and think of services as a bunch of libraries and services, and maybe it's connecting to some sort of DB. Likewise, a similar replication with a different variant, but these are actually catering requests from your employees. And these dashed line with arrow, right? These are solid. These are not solid line on purpose. This dashed line representing a client interface, and this client interface, for those of you with Java background, you might know this is. You might be writing a top level interface, and then that interface is actually exposing some of the services that has been provided. What I meant to say is that you do not want your customer to access everything in your DB or all the private information that is hosted in your backend. You are only exposing what they need to know or what they can access. So, and this lollipop sign in here, as you can see, that means it's an interface. So think of this client interface residing somewhere in Waterlootec Client Services, which is exposing the services to Waterlootec Client Portal. And dash line touching that lollipop icon represents dependency, as in this portal cannot operate on its own. It is depending on some services. Now, you can expand the same example down below. I'm not going to repeat. So similar example, we have different interfaces, which is very important to know. And we have different type of services. And so this is a component diagram. Now, you have seen the component diagram, and then how do you like to convey to your senior leaders that how it's deployed? Remind you, it is not showing you all the tools that is being used in your ecosystem. It's a very high level view. You might be asking, where is the DV? Where is my load balancer? Where are the other IT infrastructure? How come I don't see all of that? So the idea in here is keep the idea very simple, so that people know how the software is deployed. So starting with the component diagram, now we are shifting towards deployment diagram. Now that we understand component diagram, deployment diagram is going to tell us exactly how it is deployed. So think of each of this block, right, in the section in the middle, think of each of this block as a deployment container. Again, when I say container, I gotta be careful. I'm not saying that it's a Docker container or anything else. Think of this as container. It's a place where something resides. So in this case, I have a first block saying the client application, and the second block down below we have employee application, and on the right we have the server. If you look carefully, you will see that what I mentioned about the client portal and employee portal, right? These two components residing in two different container. These two components. And these two components, I forgot to mention, these two components could be anything ranging from a CLI application to DLL, or your native application that is running on your handheld devices, on your Windows, on your Mac, or maybe on your Ubuntu. It doesn't matter. So for the sake of simplicity, think of it this way. You have a client application that run across many platforms and which is being represented with Waterlootec client portal and which is residing inside that container. And similarly for employee, you have a different variation of container and those things are constrained there. They're separated. I did not make it very complex. You can technically draw another container right in the middle where you're saying that, okay, a client application and employee application have some common element, so I need to refactor them. But usually design evolves. So as your product evolves, you might do those refactoring. But as they say in the software world, first make it work, then make it better. So imagine you're first developing it, we are making it to work. On the right-hand side is the server. As you can see, the dependency line matters. In this case, we're saying that both of this container on the left depends on the server. In this case, it could be a cloud server hosted by your IT or hosted somewhere in the cloud by some third-party provider. And in that server, what you have deployed is you have deployed a bunch of services. You might have deployed database, which I'm not showing in here. So what we're saying is this client application and employee application is depending on the server sitting somewhere. So as you can see, the transformation of idea from simple poster or the banner you saw in your hallway or the coffee room, how that translates to how the designer and software architect understands it. And that will take us to the next section. Let me minimize this window. And if I were to go to the next section of this slide, which is question. And everything been said so far, question usually we get is why is it important? Why does this matter? Now, think of this use case. During your first few weeks at work, a software architect in your team handed out a document or a wiki to all the new hires. Now that shows the entire software ecosystem and how it works. Now, that is if you're lucky. Sometimes things are not well managed. And in that case, unfortunately, one way to tackle this would be you are going to enable debug lines in multiple components in the software ecosystem and you're trying to trace the code. A lot of the times it's not an easy thing to do. Now, here's the thing. There are ways to do it, but unfortunately, it's not written anywhere and most people won't tell you, right? They won't tell you because they have an evil plan to derail you. It's not it. Most likely, senior guys in your team are busy with different priorities, different projects, or they might be assuming that you have learned this at school. Now, school is thinking that, hey, we give you basic, you know how to understand and how to draw this diagram, you know what each one means. So you go to the work, those guys are going to train you up and you're going to be good, right? As you can see, there is a gap in between. So that leads us to where we can help. So we have course offering that has dedicated section around it. And our plan is to calibrate it according to the needs of the students. So our goal is to bridge that gap between what you learn at school and what you can expect at work. At work, we can give you a clue like this. So remember the example I showed you where you have a software and then you're trying to understand everything through a debug line and you're reading each classes, you're opening up each packages and you're trying to make a sense of which component is talking to which component, and then you have a huge log lines open and you're trying to grab through the log lines to find out exactly which component is talking to which component. That's a good thing to do. But as you are doing it, if you don't have those wiki or the documentation or the guide, what you can do is you can draw those class diagrams, you can draw those package diagrams, you can have a copy of your own, right? And imagine if the team did not have any of this document, and as a new hire within the first 3 to 4 weeks of training, you're coming up with that type of clarity around the design and showing how each component work with each other. I can bet you that you're going to impress some people within the team. and it's going to work in your favor. And also, we can help you to avoid situation like this where you have seen a girl or a boy who has been in the orientation and who is same age as you. He or she is sitting right across your cube while you're struggling, and this boy or girl magically knows exactly what needs to be done. And let us assure you that there's no magic there. Behind every magic, there is hard work and there is untold stories. And this is where we come in to help you. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. Some of you might think, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to park this on the side when I go to work. I know enough. I can figure this out. As you figure this out, right, you'll have a lot of struggle, and those times you'll be surviving. And think of the other person who already know this, who is ready, right? That person will be thriving. So even though you started in the same time, the other person is going to be making different impression than you. And that if someone is 3 to 4 weeks ahead of you, especially in a beginner situation, that's a big deal. That's a big deal in a very fast-paced team, because you'll be seen in a different lens than the other individual, and you don't want that happening. And this is why we can help you. And last but not the least, and if you are interested to get in touch with us, I posted learn more and how to get in touch with us, and anything you want to know, you can shoot us an email and we'll get back to you. And for today, this is all I had, and stay tuned for the more vlog that we'll be making. And thank you once again. Bye now.